This year at Blizzcon, Blizzard Entertainment announced the release of Diablo Immortal. And as you can tell, it was received horribly. So badly that many people were swift to point out just how much Blizzard screwed up.
The biggest marketing blunder in gaming.
So utterly tone-deaf and misguided.
A terrible mobile game.
A digital tomato tossing.
A cynically produced piece of garbage.
Fucking Blizzard! Shit!
But what if that wasn't the case? What if there was more to the story? For a long time, Blizzard had been known as a video game company that built strong fan bases for classic, long-standing franchises like Warcraft, StarCraft, World of Warcraft, and of course, Diablo. But riding on the back of success breeds a compulsion to achieve more. And in 2008, Blizzard Entertainment was looking to promote its games to an even wider audience. To do this, Blizzard's owners decided to merge with Activision, a larger, more corporately driven video game company. Wanting to retain controlling rights to their franchises, Blizzard was turned into a subsidiary, wherein Vivendi, the then owner-publisher of Blizzard Games, was allowed to maintain a majority ownership and control of game development. At the time, this merger seemed to be working incredibly well for Blizzard. By 2010, World of Warcraft would hit its all-time high subscribership of roughly 12 million. StarCraft 2 would launch and go on to become the largest competitive esports game at the time. And the Diablo 3 release in 2012 set a new record for the fastest-selling PC game, having sold over 3.5 million copies in the first 24 hours. It was as if Blizzard was on top of the world. But despite all of the company's success, in mid-2013, Vivendi sold their majority ownership and control of video game development over to Activision. This event marked a huge turning point in the future trajectory for Blizzard Entertainment, as not only would the company's name be changed to Activision Blizzard, but the way that games were created would become much more meticulous and deliberate, with a heavy focus on in-game microtransactions, something that Blizzard had previously been opposed to. In fact, in a 2007 interview, when asked why Blizzard doesn't add in-game microtransactions to World of Warcraft, which would make the company more profitable, Blizzard co-founder Frank Pierce responded by saying, "Protecting the integrity of the game is ensuring that the subscribership has a reason to continue playing, and feels good about the experience that they have." As you can plainly see, Blizzard's original owners were staunchly against adding in-game transactions before having become involved with Activision, especially when it came to World of Warcraft, their largest franchise at the time. Fast forward a few years to Activision's majority buyout in June of 2013, and not 2 months later, microtransactions are officially confirmed to be released in World of Warcraft. But this was just the beginning of what would grow to become a much longer history of corporate greed. In March of 2014, Activision Blizzard would release Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft, a free-to-play, online competitive card game that currently has more ways to spend your money than there are ways to play the game, with in-game microtransactions for card packs, arena runs, hero characters, pre-order bundles, solo adventures, and, occasionally, competitive brawl tournaments. To put the true cost of the game into perspective, if you wanted the full collectible card set, you'd be looking at spending over $3,000, not including older card sets and seasonal expansions. If you wanted to keep up with future expansions, you'd need to spend an additional $150 on each one, and use your in-game saved up currency acquired from playing the game, according to a Polygon article written by Daniel Friedman last year, which breaks down the financial costs. The article goes on to conclude that in 2017 the game had become significantly more expensive under the guise of inclusivity to newer players, rotating out older card sets and increasing the number of future cards to be released by 50% over previous years. Looking back on the game, it would appear as if Hearthstone was made purely as an experiment to see just how much people would be willing to spend on microtransactions for a single game. Once Activision Blizzard had analyzed their user data, the results were assumedly resounding. Since the release of Hearthstone, Activision Blizzard has yet to release a Blizzard game that doesn't include some form of microtransaction, and they have since gone back to older franchises in an attempt to milk the fans for even more money. In 2016, the company added in-game purchases to StarCraft 2, and in 2015, they attempted to add a real money storefront to Diablo 3. But due to negative fan reactions in most regions, in-game purchases for the game were only added to Asian servers. This more recent addition of microtransactions to games that fans have already purchased seems to be a trend that doesn't show any signs of slowing down. One example of this being Activision Blizzard's Overwatch, which currently sells cosmetic loot crates despite the game costing $40. Meanwhile, Activision's flagship series Call of Duty has been upholding their practice of raking in additional in-game profit with the new Call of Duty Black Ops 4, a game that already comes with an $80 price tag. But Activision Blizzard, being a giant corporate entity with an insatiable appetite for other people's money, was keen on extending their empire into the wallets of the new, trendy gamers of the mobile era. Which brings us back to Activision Blizzard's designated test subject, Hearthstone. On December 14th, 2014, Activision Blizzard released the mobile version of Hearthstone, making it the first ever mobile game to be released by the company. And once again, they would turn to the analytics. And after enough time had been spent evaluating the potential for this new growth vector, Activision Blizzard began working on a scheme to aggressively expand into the mobile sector. By the time November of 2016 rolled around, Activision Blizzard had swindled enough money out of the fans to drop a casual $6 billion in the acquisition of King Digital, a mobile video game company most famous for Candy Crush and other mobile games that have a general appeal towards audiences who wouldn't traditionally have been considered gamers. So, just like that, Activision Blizzard had stay-at-home moms and minimum wage employees matching virtual candies at their fingertips. Unlike the gamers of old, however, these poor souls attempting to numb the quiet desperation that so rules their miserable lives aren't quite as hardened to the continuous barrage of microtransactions that regularly assault their screens. And so these new-aged gamers are willing to follow in-game prompts that ask them to pay small fees that over time add up significantly, all in the name of additional lives and in-game power-ups. And boy, are they willing to pay. According to Activision Blizzard's own annual report, 2016's net revenue in the mobile sector alone had reached nearly $1.7 billion, making up 25% of all of their net revenue. But it doesn't end there. In 2017, mobile net revenue had grown to over $2 billion, making it far and away their fastest growing platform. In fact, their 2017 mobile numbers were so strong that mobile actually managed to surpass PC, edging it out by roughly $40 million. And if things continue trending the way that they have been, mobile will be set to surpass console as the #1 source of net revenue for Activision Blizzard before the beginning of 2019. Which brings us to Diablo Immortal, the next step towards a new generation of mobile gaming. But this one step for Blizzard would lead to a catastrophic downfall, with shares plummeting over 30% since the game's announcement on November 2nd. After receiving one of the worst live fan reactions to a panel ever,
华的所有玩家一样，我们都是暴雪游戏的粉丝，也是暗黑破坏神系列游戏的粉丝。
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that?
people were looking for answers. Why take the Diablo franchise name and put it on a game that is only available for the mobile platform, when all of the fans from the previous games are PC and console gamers? Well, some people preferred the narrative of big dumb company is out of touch with their fans, while others espouse the belief that Blizzard simply doesn't care about their older fan base and would rather target a much larger Asian market of mobile gamers. But when you look into it, things don't really seem to add up on either side. I find it hard to believe that a company who has consistently analyzed risks and intentionally taken precautions to keep the hardcore fans happy would then take a fan-favorite franchise, turn it into a mobile-only game, and then announce it directly to those same die-hard fans without expecting some form of backlash. Additionally, I don't buy into the idea that Activision Blizzard would make this announcement in front of the North American fans of the series if they were intending to target a completely different demographic. No, what I theorize is that there is an even more insidious underlying explanation for the Diablo Immortal fiasco. And while I do believe that Activision Blizzard had a plan to make a mobile game that would expand their presence in the Asian market, I also believe that Activision Blizzard may have constructed and executed a plan to intentionally tank their own stock price. See, Activision Blizzard has been an absolute profit beast for a very long time, and since their annual report was released back in February of 2017, the stock hadn't gone much below $65. But Activision Blizzard, always having extra cash on hand, likes to reinvest their money through share repurchase programs. And the reasons for them buying back stock in their own company appears to be pretty self-evident the second you take a look at their 5-year chart. But add on the fact that these programs count towards their net operating loss, and not only do they have an excellent return on investment, but hundreds of millions in additional tax breaks and benefits. So, when the company announced in their annual report that they'd be repurchasing $1 billion worth in shares over the next couple of years, it all just seemed like another good idea. But Activision Blizzard isn't exactly a company that settles for good ideas, especially when they could have even more. And BlizzCon might just have provided the perfect opportunity to achieve just that. At BlizzCon, you won't see a Call of Duty panel. Fans of Candy Crush won't show up cosplaying their favorite characters, excited to learn about the new content expansions, though these two games make up the company's largest franchises. Instead, you get a corporate illusion designed to trick the fans into believing that the old Blizzard community hasn't changed, and that Activision is a separate entity. But as you're all well aware, that isn't the case. BlizzCon is the representation of a divided corporation. It brings together an impassioned minority which appears to represent the company's consumer base as a whole, when in reality, it doesn't even come close.
Not even close, bud.
Activision Blizzard was obviously aware of this, and I believe that it is likely that they used the announcement of Diablo Immortal at BlizzCon to trick fans and investors for financial gain. Think about it. They announce a new Diablo game exclusively for a platform that the series has never been on before. And even though the announcement would hurt the brand's reputation, most fans of the franchise will still likely end up buying Diablo 4 whenever it gets released. Then, factor in the financial benefit of having a mobile version of Diablo that can rake in cash from people outside of the usual demographics, and the possibilities of advertising to that new user base. When you consider these potential upsides, the decision for Activision Blizzard to make a move is easily plus EV, which brings us to NetEase, a mobile game company that already has a successful game in a market that Activision Blizzard is interested in entering. A game that can be cheaply reskinned and reworked to add in features that play more like Diablo. But more importantly, the company is from China.
China. China. China. China. China. China. China. China. China. China.
This makes the partnership a play that could potentially scare off investors, afraid of any possible involvement with a country that the United States is actively trade warring. Something that I find even more interesting is Activision Blizzard's post-panel behavior. Only one day later, Alan Adham did an interview announcing that Activision Blizzard will be pumping out more mobile games, spanning all of Blizzard's intellectual properties. But even more interesting is that the story wasn't picked up by the big gaming journalists until almost a week later, immediately after the stock had appeared to be recovering from a relatively small dip, which also happened to be on the same trading day that the company released their quarterly report, in which they beat analyst expectations by around 6%. Now, I don't like to point the finger at those who don't deserve it, but all of this circumstantial evidence seems to stack up pretty conveniently for Activision Blizzard. See, even if they only buy half of the shares announced in their repurchase program around current prices, they'd be saving in excess of $115 million, and that's assuming they pay well over market price, and the stock only goes back up to $65 per share. But if their previous 5 years are any indication of what's to come, I wouldn't be surprised if those shares tripled in value. So obviously, there would be a financial motivation for Activision Blizzard to manipulate people into thinking that they made a horrible mistake. But there is another interesting coincidence that gives credence to this theory. An event that happened just under 1 month to the day of the disastrous Diablo demonstration. On October 3rd, 2018, Blizzard co-founder, president, and CEO Mike Morhaime decided to step down, seemingly out of the blue. This was a man who had been with the company since its inception in 1991, so surely he would have a reason for deciding to leave it now at the age of 51. But those reasons weren't expressed in his announcement post stating that he would be stepping down, whether that be due to an interest in retaining some form of privacy or because of a non-disclosure agreement keeping him from revealing a grand conspiracy. I can only speculate.
You're fired.
Speculation aside, when you look at all the hard evidence, all you really have is a company whose CEO left before the announcement of a new bastardized version of a fan-favorite video game. It was poorly received, investors got scared, and the stock price crashed. But in this particular case, I think that the more intricate details and company history combine to tell a fuller, more accurate story of large corporate conspiracy and greed. That being said, I'd like to know what you think. Am I just a nut job looking too closely at patterns on cereal boxes, or do you have a different theory? Post in the comment section, on my Discord, or on Twitter, in that order. Rusty Cage supplied the background music for this video, and he's got his own channel, as well as a comic book coming out soon, so make sure to check him out. And if you want to support me, then you can send your crypto to the addresses linked on the screen, or check out my Patreon, which should have been updated by this point.